It was a cold, foggy morning in the Netherlands. The kind of fog so thick you could barely see the track ahead. Two trains, each carrying hundreds of passengers, were racing toward the same point on the map. Neither driver could see the other. Neither knew what was about to happen. And in just seconds, this quiet countryside would witness the deadliest train crash in Dutch history. A disaster so shocking, it changed the nation's railways forever. This is the story of 1962 Harmelen, Netherlands, train collision. Harmelen is a small town in the heart of the Netherlands, home to just over 8,000 people. It lies in the province of Utrecht, about 30 kilometers or 18 miles south of Amsterdam, and roughly 39 kilometers or 24 miles northeast of Rotterdam. Harmelen hasn't had its own train station since 1936, but it remains an important point on the Dutch rail network. Here, two railway lines meet. One of them is the Utrecht-Rotterdam Main Line, a 56-kilometer or 35-mile double-tracked and electrified route. Just north of Harmelen, a second railway line splits from the Utrecht-Rotterdam Main Line and heads toward the town of Breukelen. This line is 8.3 kilometers, or 5.2 miles, long and has two tracks. At the time of the accident, the two railway lines met at ground level, in what's called a same elevation crossover. This meant that trains going from Rotterdam to Amsterdam had to cross over the tracks used by trains heading the other way. To keep this safe, a system of signals was used. If a train needed to cross, the oncoming train, in this case heading toward Rotterdam, would first see a warning signal telling the driver to expect stop and slow down. Next, a red signal would make them stop before the crossover. The same rules applied for trains going toward Amsterdam if a train from Utrecht had the right of way. One of the trains in the crash was train number 464, a regional service from Rotterdam to Amsterdam. It was operated by the Dutch National Railway, NS, using a type of electric train called the Materiel 46, or MAT 46. The train that day was made up of a 4-car unit, number 700, pulling a 2-car unit, number 297. On the morning of the accident, train 464 had a driver and about 180 passengers on board. Coming from the opposite direction, on its journey from Leeuwarden to Rotterdam, was express train 164. This was an 11-car train, most of which, 7 out of the 11 cars, were the Plan E-type passenger coaches. The other 4 cars in the express were older MAT 24-type coaches. These had originally been electric multiple units introduced in 1924, but in the 1950s they were converted into regular passenger cars by removing their motors and pantographs. The ones in this train were former middle cars, each seating around 70 passengers, though sources vary between 64 and 88 seats per car. At the front of the express on the day of the accident was locomotive NS1131, part of the Class 100 series. These 4-axle electric locomotives were introduced in 1950 and could be used for many types of trains. On the morning of January 8, 1962, Express Train 164 was on its journey from Leeuwarden to Rotterdam. By the time it left Utrecht Station, 10.5 kilometers or 6.5 miles east of the Harmelen crossover, it was running 6 minutes late. Thick fog hung over the tracks, cutting visibility to almost nothing. On board were around 900 passengers. Under normal conditions, the express would pass the crossover at 9:14 a.m., followed by the electric multiple unit, or EMU, at 9:18 a.m., and then another train on the express's route at 9:21. This pattern repeated every hour, keeping traffic steady and predictable until that morning. Because of the delay, the express did not reach the Harmelen signal box at its usual time. Believing it was still further down the line, the signalman gave priority to the EMU coming from the opposite direction, heading north toward Amsterdam. At 9:18 a.m., the EMU passed the main signal west of the crossover at 75 kilometers, or 46.6 miles per hour. The signal showed green, clearing it to cross the junction. The express was expected to stop on the other side, east of the crossover. But that morning, it wouldn't. The express roared past the yellow pre-signal, expect stop, at 125 kilometers, or 77.7 miles per hour. At that very moment, the EMU had already moved onto the opposing track, heading toward the line to Breukelen. In 1962, there was no automatic train control linked to the signals. Following speed limits and stopping at red lights was entirely up to the drivers. At 9:19 a.m., the express driver hit the emergency brakes, likely after spotting the red signal rushing toward him. But it was far too late. The EMU was only a few hundred meters ahead. Its driver probably never saw the express coming before the two trains collided head-on. The EMU still traveling at 107 kilometers, or 66.5 miles per hour. The force of the collision threw the express train's locomotive off the tracks to the right. The driver's cab was crushed, and the locomotive flipped over as it tore free from the rest of the train. Behind it, the leading passenger car rode up over the frame of the EMU's first car, shearing through it and destroying its interior completely. The EMU's second car was ripped open along one side as the express's first 5 cars left the rails, plowing through the wreckage. The EMU's third car was crushed between the derailing express coaches and the 3 cars still attached at the rear of its own train. When the movement finally stopped, only the express train's last 6 cars and the EMU's final 3 cars were still on the rails, mostly undamaged. In the chaos, 91 people, including both drivers, were killed instantly. Another 54 were badly injured, and in the weeks that followed, 2 more victims died from their injuries, raising the final death toll to 93. The deafening crash, heard across the town, had just marked the worst railway disaster in the history of the Netherlands. Residents of Harmelen were the first to reach the crash site, quickly joined by emergency crews from Utrecht as the scale of the disaster became clear. In the EMU's leading car, there had been no chance of survival. Its basic crash protection stood no match against the force of the heavy express striking at high speed. The car was reduced to little more than a scattered field of wreckage. Most of the survivors were found toward the rear of both trains, in the sections that had stayed on the rails and were mostly intact. Investigators determined that the signaling system had operated exactly as designed, and the signal box crew had followed every rule in routing the EMU. From the wreckage of the express train's locomotive, they recovered the speed recorder. It revealed a crucial detail. The driver had passed the yellow expect stop signal at full speed, only reacting upon sighting the red signal at the crossover. By then, there was far too little distance left to halt before the EMU entered the junction. The system's design relied on drivers reducing speed at a yellow signal, allowing them to stop safely if the next signal was red. Ignoring that step in a train traveling as fast as the express left no margin for recovery. Because both drivers were killed and the wreckage was so badly damaged, investigators decided to recreate the express train's final moments. On January 14, 1962, they assembled a nearly identical train for driving and braking tests. The results confirmed that the driver had applied the emergency brakes only about 95 meters, 312 feet, before the red signal. This matched the limited visibility at the accident site that morning. But it also revealed something alarming. The train was still traveling at 125 kilometers per hour, 77.7 miles per hour, in a section where it should have been moving at just 30 kilometers per hour, or 18.6 miles per hour. With both drivers killed instantly, investigators could never know for sure why the express train's driver ignored the yellow signal. The official theory was that thick fog made the signal hard to see. Another possibility, though less certain, was that the driver assumed he still had the right of way, as his train usually did. Under the original schedule, the express train was meant to pass the crossing first. But that morning, the EMU reached the crossover ahead of the delayed express, and the order was changed at the last moment. In the aftermath, officials considered several ways to improve safety at crossover sections. One proposal was to place 2 expect stop signals before a red, giving trains more time to slow or offering drivers a second chance if they missed the first yellow. Another was to use dual red signals, 2 reds in sequence when a stop was required. Both ideas were rejected, as they would sharply reduce line capacity. Investigators also warned of a dangerous side effect. If drivers began expecting a second serious signal, they might be more inclined to pass a yellow or even a red, with catastrophic consequences if no backup signal existed. In the wake of the Harmelen disaster, the rollout of ATB was accelerated. By 1970, 100 kilometers of rail line were already equipped with the system, and by 1992, it covered all of the Netherlands' main lines. The last remaining gaps were closed between 2001 and 2002. The Harmelen disaster was a turning point in Dutch rail safety, a tragedy that forced change, but at the cost of 93 lives. Yet even with modern train control systems, no technology is perfect, and accidents, though rarer, still happen. So it raises the question, in a world where safety systems are constantly improving, how much responsibility should still rest on the human at the controls? And could a tragedy like Harmelen ever happen again?